to Season 2 of the Fairways People podcast, where we share inspiring stories, meaningful conversations, and the voices behind our charity. Each episode offers a closer look at the people and passion that drive us. Hosted by Fairways Managing Director Gareth Webb.
So hello everyone, so welcome to another Fairways People podcast. I'm Gareth Webb, the Managing Director. And for our podcast today, we have the lovely Lorna Taylor.
Hi, Gareth.
How are
Hi,
you?
everyone. I'm okay. Nervous, but okay.
Well, I appreciate your time today and thanks for coming in. So, Lorna, you're the head of our therapeutic services. I'm really excited to learn a little bit more about you today and what's behind you, them layers. I'll give you a little introduction to Lorna. So, you've worked with Fairways now for around 3 years?
Yep.
Okay, and you joined actually as the head of therapeutic services for the charity. You currently oversee all aspects of therapy and, I guess, therapeutic interventions and trauma-informed ways of working for our staff and young people. And as we know, our staff work with young people and families that have encountered lots of different trauma in early childhood and then yet again when entering the care system.
Yeah.
And I guess this is the heart of what we do in it, is that how do we ensure that our staff have got the best resources and support to ensure that we deliver the best care and education to our young people. So that's primarily the job of you and your team, and how you support our staff across the operations and across the charity. So we invest an enormous lot of money into training and resources to help better equip our staff to work with trauma, and you're really key in doing that. So thank you for coming in. Now, I just want to learn a bit more about yourself. So prior to Fairways, though, you had a successful career in social care. You've been in social care for about 20 years.
Yeah.
And you was a qualified mental health nurse.
Yeah.
And you worked for CAMS for many years as well.
I did, yeah.
Okay. So with all guests, let's start from the beginning then. So talk to me a little bit about your childhood and where you grew up.
Okay, so I'm Southampton born and bred. My dad's from a rich Millbrook lineage, one of 5 children, council estate, pretty poor, no central heating, but so much love in that house. And my dad and his brothers were known in the local community for being good at cricket and football. Okay. And that's where they got their, kudos from. Unfortunately for my dad, both of his parents died when he was quite young. So he nursed his mum at home after she had a stroke. And I think that had quite a big impact on all of us growing up, that family was really precious, but also that it wasn't guaranteed, that, we had to enjoy what we've got now. Yeah. My mum's from Portsmouth. So she was, unfortunately, her mum left when she was 1. So she and her dad moved in with her auntie. So we've got a bit of a not brought up by your parents situation. And then she lived with her auntie, who was a nurse, until she was 6. And then her dad married my grandma. That's kind of interesting too, because my grandma was originally from London, but got evacuated to Wales in the war. To a place called Llanfair Caerhainon. Wow. And she got evacuated with her deaf mum. So in London, her mum had got married to her dad quite young because of a lack of other options. If you're from a poor London family and deaf, you didn't have, nobody really wants to marry you. And he was a bit of a tricky character. But moving to Wales was incredibly difficult initially because my grandma's mum got passed by lip reading, and lip reading Welsh, apparently quite difficult. So it was a really hard start, but actually my grandma really found herself there, and that really built her resilience. And she actually visited there and visited the community she lived with every year until she died. So it was, as part of my family history, sending people to Wales and then coming back more resilient is, baked in. Nothing to do with Bath though, so hopefully they'll let me retire there. Mum then lived in Waterlooville till she was 18, came to Southampton to do nursing at Southampton Hospital, met my dad. My brother's a nurse as well. My sister's an accountant, like my dad. We're not very inventive in my family. So that's my parents. And then I went to a Millbrook infant and junior school, and then St Anne's. I found school really difficult. I was outside the headmistress's office quite a lot. Often for arguing about perceived injustice.
No, really?
Can you believe it? And I found myself, I did okay at school, but I really found myself in work. So I worked at initially washing pots, and then I was a lifeguard and a swimming teacher at Shirley Pool, and I also operated a chocolate fountain through university as a job. So I really enjoyed working, and that was a really important part, of things for me. So
okay, wow, there's lots to unpick there. So well, let's go out. So it seems like you followed in the footsteps of your mum and stuff in terms of nursing.
Yeah.
So did you go to college, that normal route of?
Yeah, so my brother's a nurse as well, hilariously. I went to college. I thought I was going to be a medic. I got placed at Imperial College in London to do medicine, and then I partied too hard and messed up my exams. So I was like, right then, better be a nurse. Didn't want to be a general nurse like my mum, so thought mental health nursing would be a good route, and went to and actually applied for mental health nursing at 17 and went for my interview at 17. And when I got there, they did say, what the hell? Like, why do you want to be a mental health nurse? And I had a little bit of experience. One of my close friends had been in Lee House when we were teenagers, so I had visited there, and but really I had no idea what I was getting into, Gareth. And now, as I got into it, I was like, oh, this is like nursing of talking. This is nursing of people, and all the partying and stuff actually made sense then. Like, I love people. I love people's stories, and that's what mental health nursing is essentially. So. So normal. So school, decent GCSEs because I had a tutor. College, messed up my A levels. Went to university to do nursing, and that back then you could do an advanced diploma and they paid you. So for me, coming from a family where we did have some resource. By that point, my dad had worked really hard, but actually choosing not to have a debt as I started my working career was an important factor in that decision.
Interesting. So you. Like you touched on then, so mental health nursing is quite an unusual route also.
Yeah.
So what, obviously you've done that and you stayed in that field.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about that then, so your journey as a mental health nurse.
Yeah, so my first job, for nursing you have to do 3 years at university. Your first placement is a general placement. So I worked on a cardiac ward, which I actually loved, and I nearly swapped out of mental health nursing, but my mum's a cardiac nurse, so got to try and form your own path. And then my first job was at Bluebird House, which was I opened under Michael Crutchley.
Oh, okay.
And we supported 12 to 18s who were there under the law, so they'd committed some crimes. I was a staff nurse there, and that was an incredibly tough job. Like, those children were so their behaviour was incredibly challenging. They're the children that children's homes can't cope with because they've committed a crime. Incredibly challenging job. Also challenging because at that point very much it was a justice model. And I really felt when I was there that that's not what those kids needed. What they needed was compassion and good parenting. And I felt in my bones that what we were doing, and seclusion, rip-proof clothing, real restrictive practice wasn't right. But I had no other model really for what it should look like. And I left there with my own PTSD and a real concern that I couldn't hack it as a nurse. Miraculously for me, I got a job at the Behavioural Resource Service in Southampton, which I know you remember. And it was there that I really learned about. It was a multi-agency, so joint funded between health and social care, multidisciplinary, so not just nurses, all the flavours of clinician. And it was there I learned about complex developmental trauma and how it plays out in families. And I stayed there for 10 years. I learned an enormous amount about systemic theories, therapeutic formulation, the importance of play, and how to manage risk. And I worked with incredible psychologists and family therapists, educational psychologists, specialist teachers, including Catherine Brown and Becky Barrett, who continue to teach me so much, as do the incredible humans I work with at the Hub. I met you then. And Matt Collins. Yeah. I worked alongside you for a young man who was at Swanwick School and who lived at Manor Farm.
We did, yeah.
Carla was actually on shift when I did my observations for my assessment. Our game plan as a network, I seem to remember, was to get him to 18 without him going to prison. He was a kid who had incredibly violent flashbacks and was built much stronger than his age, so was really difficult to manage. And I think we managed to get him to 19 before he went to prison. So I count that as a win. I also worked alongside, and in that role, and then my next role at Eastleigh Cams, which I'll tell you about in a minute, I worked alongside loads of children's homes, so from all different companies, and some of them were great. Manor Farm was pretty good even back then, and some of them were pretty shocking. And I learned a lot about the systemic stuff that plays out when we're dealing with trauma reenactment. I stayed there for 10 years. I had my kids while I was there, and I mostly loved it, but I got a bit disillusioned when they transitioned to a more crisis-based model, and I went and worked at Eastleigh Cams then. Again, there I learnt from some incredible clinicians, including Michelle, who I've convinced to join me. But I was frustrated a bit by the medical model at Cams, and then COVID hit, and COVID at Cams was incredibly intense time. I had my kids at home, they were little. I was doing really complex safeguarding stuff, trauma work, walking around parks, trying to manage suicidal young people without any hospitals to put them in. And there was way more work than resources, and it had an incredible impact on me and my own mental health. I ended up being pretty physically and emotionally broken, alongside the rest of the NHS workforce, I think, at that point. I stayed for a year, I think, after COVID settled down, but really I was a shadow of my former self by that point.
Wow. Okay. Again, lots to unpick there. So let's just rewind a little bit. So Bluebird House.
Yeah.
I actually, when I did my degree, I actually did the module, the Forensic Child and Adolescent Mental Health module that I think all the staff at the time then had to do as part of their training. And I did some work experience in there.
Yeah.
It's quite a unique surface, which is
absolutely. There's only 6, or at that point there was only 6 of them in the country, and it was the highest security one of the 6, so the fences were higher and there was more doors between them and the outside world. So a really unique service, and some really very poorly young people.
I was going to say, like, that's what I found quite hard hitting. I guess we talk about mental health, and but you're talking like really poorly children, aren't you?
Yeah, and massive complex trauma. Like we get some chronologies here, but I'd never seen anything like that. I also did before they actually opened it. I did some work at Ravenswood, which is the adult version of that in Fareham. And I did a bit of work at Lee House, and just the complexity at Bluebird, and just the level of challenge and behaviour you had to manage was, I mean, if I wrote a book about it, you wouldn't believe the stories.
So how long were you at Bluebird?
So I was there for 2 years.
2 years, okay. And then you went into BRS.
Yeah.
And again, that's like you said, that's where we crossed paths. Again, BRS I felt was quite a unique service as well.
Really,
a really good service.
Yeah.
Is it still going on?
Unfortunately, they've closed it. So they, it went for a really long time. They originally had a residential unit as well as sort of a short-term assessment unit, pretty similar to what we do in Wales.
No.
Yeah. So Intake was next door.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And that was a children's home initially, and then became like a crash bed for kids who are over 14, should really have been in care, but we left them at home because they were running home or because there weren't the resources to put them in. There's a point, isn't there, where are you going to do more damage by removing a kid? And it was sort of an experiment in, can we keep these kids safe enough by giving them somewhere where there's a meal and a washing machine and a shower and a place to get away from whatever mad stuff's happening at home. I also worked really closely with Our House at my time in Southampton, which was a very similar to the Garden House model. We took in littler ones and tried to rehab them to get them into foster care, and our foster carers would come and work alongside the residential workers while they're transitioning them over, and that was again a great project, but it's hard to keep these things funded for a long time, and I'm really sad that Southampton have closed BRS. I'm really curious about how they're doing that stuff now, without that. But
so then from BRS you went to Cams?
Yep, Eastleigh Cams.
So talk to me a little bit about Cams then, because there's always a lot you read about that they're in crisis, the waiting list through the roof, Yeah. Is that true?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's an incredibly difficult time for mental health services. They have been, the Tory government took resources away over and over and over and over and over again. I became a nurse, a mental health nurse under Labour. There was resource, and what I've seen is that drop over the time, and the amount of not so much at actual CAMS, but in the community. So Sure Start centres, youth clubs, all of that support stuff, all of that early intervention stuff just isn't happening. And what we're seeing now is the teenagers who there were no Sure Start centres for. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So actually what we've got is kids who've survived COVID, who were online during COVID, who haven't got the same resource that we had before, and we're having a crisis at CAMS. And the thing is, when you keep the resource at CAMS the same but increase the amount of crisis, all we can do is revolving door the crisis kids, and we don't have the capacity to do the long-term work, which means that people just come back into crisis. And that's eventually what finished me off, was that we didn't have the ability always to make people better. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes that still happens. There's still some incredible clinicians at CAMS who are able to hold the line and see those kids for as long as they need seeing, but mostly it's an in and out model. Also, children in care, they find it very difficult to access therapy, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but the CAMS model is, if you don't show up 3 times, we close you. And actually that doesn't work for our kids because they can't show up. They're so under-resourced, they can't even manage the first bit.
So I've just got me on a tangent now. So when so in the last, I guess, over 20 years you've been doing this work, do you feel that the impact, mental health is impacting teenagers more now than it was 20 years ago? Has it got worse, I guess, do you feel, for teenagers and young people?
I think that some of the safe spaces where teenagers had to be before aren't there anymore. So I had youth clubs. My parents were more around. Like a lot of our families, me included, both parents have to work. There's a lot less availability of people around. They spend a lot more time online. We're all frightened of letting our kids down the park, so they're not having that social interaction. Schools are really stretched because they're really pushed to reach targets, but actually, some of my teachers were really helpful and sort of did that informal, mentoring, and there's less space for that in school. So I think it's a multifaceted problem. But I do think that it's a particular challenge for our young people. For me, smartphones, when we got cars, they didn't have seatbelts in, and a load of people died, and then they put seatbelts in. I think we're on the phone equivalent of that. They're brilliant tools, but they haven't got seatbelts. I was going to say
social media, you read and you hear these stories about, young people can access sites to positively promote suicide, and just the world today is just totally different, isn't it, for young people in terms of online and social media? Yeah. Scary.
It's really scary. They also, if you're, there's also some positives. If you're gay, you can find a community in a way you couldn't, 30 years ago. So there are some, I say, they're incredible tools, but the restrictions need to be put in. I really, me and Eileen are thinking to what extent can we do that as a charity without restricting kids' rights, but in order to protect them, because our kids, the neurodivergent, traumatized kids, are the most vulnerable to all of the stuff that can go wrong. So actually we need to work harder to protect them more. And actually what I see is children in care are protected less, because obviously they need to have contact with their families, but they don't need to be on the phone with people we've removed them from all the time. How do we balance that? It's a really complex thing, but absolutely. One I'm really excited to support our staff in managing on a daily basis.
Okay. So how did Fairways come about then, Lorna?
Okay, well, that's a story. So I was working at Eastleigh CAMS. I had a young person who got a place at Athelston. Yeah. So I worked really closely with Sean and Claire. And the model at Athelston, where we lowered the restrictive practice and managed the risk by increasing the opportunity for kids who'd been in hospital to have a life, worked so well for her. She did amazingly. She actually credits us with keeping her alive. But and it was a absolute massive privilege to walk alongside her. We did actually have to give notice on her placement because she was so mentally ill that we couldn't hold her in the community at that point. But yeah, it was a really good piece of work. Matt Collins had to come to some sort of high-risk strategy meetings, those CETRs actually, and he saw me, let's say, advocating strongly on behalf of the young person and holding the network to account, but also being really compassionate about the lack of resource and how tricky it was for us to hold young people like that. And he sent me a meeting invite after a meeting that just said, cunning plan, I think.
Coffee and a cunning
Coffee
plan.
and coffee and a cunning plan. And so I went, and I wasn't ready to leave CAMS. I am, very NHS, through and through. But I decided that what Fairways could offer me was a better work-life balance, the opportunity to do some stuff right that I was really frustrated wasn't able to happen in stat services. So I'm here.
You're here, yeah.
And I'm really grateful for the opportunity. I like, it's a real lovely place to be able to do some of the stuff that I was frustrated that I can do.
Okay, so let's go into that and talk to me a little bit about your role now then as Head of Therapeutic Services. What do you do?
Okay.
I know you do lots, but what do you do?
Yeah. So primarily I earn enough money to help me be a mum and a friend and I'm really proudly part-time.
Yeah.
Obviously that comes with its challenges, and you all watch me juggle. I have an incredible multidisciplinary team of 10 to lead, including therapeutic social workers, systemic practitioners, a music therapist, 2 OTs, a mental health nurse, clinical psychologist, and hopefully soon a speech and language therapist.
Yes.
As well as our hub admin, Sam, who helps me hold it all together. They are all incredibly knowledgeable enough in their fields, and I, am astounded on a daily basis by the stuff they know that I don't. But obviously leading a team like that is a full-time job. The last few years have been focused on embedding what I have called the trauma-informed basics, so debriefs, reflective supervisions, a duty service with risk management support for when kids do go into crisis. Team around the child meetings or consultations were sort of already in, but we really want to use those to have a holistic view, keep our care on track, and then hub assessment. So every kid that needs one gets a hub assessment with a clear formulation and recommendations, so we know exactly what's going on and how to move forward. We also offer therapy to children and young people or families if they're in the right space to receive that, but that's not always the case. We also offer specialist training. My neurodiversity training is particularly interesting to watch because obviously I'm not quite, I'm a bit neuro-wonky in some areas. You'll see me and my team in training rooms, reflective supervisions, Overwatch. You might bring kids to see us at the Heart Therapy Hub at Eastleigh, or see us out and about in all of our services doing assessments, formulations, that sort of stuff. I also think about trauma reenactment on a more systemic level in each home and within the organisation, and we try and name that to tame it. So the therapeutic principles I learnt with working with families mean that we try and put, I'm trying to contribute to the management team, putting together pieces of information to give you a clear picture of what's happening and look for compassionate ways forward for children and staff. That trauma reenactment stuff gets in everywhere, and we can't be cross at the kids for the trauma they bring. So what happens is we get narky with each other, and what we've got to do is find ways through that. Not that we shouldn't hold our standards really high, but that we should be compassionate in all of those interactions and in finding a way through. Then we're trying to build relationships and resilience in Fairways so that when the tough stuff happens, we're ready for that. And what's very sadly just happened at the family centre, we had really good relationships. We were able to offer debriefs, and I'm incredibly proud of the way Fairways have been able to respond to that team when they've been through that really awful situation, which is part of our job and is going to happen from time to time because we are in a risky, all of our teams, the family centre, absolutely, but all of our schools work with really complex young people, all of our residentials do. We need to have a mechanism for being there in the tough stuff and for being resilient, and when things get hard, not letting the cracks grow, but being able to hold each other in those times.
Yeah. When you say, so you spoke about trauma reenactment for staff, what's that mean, trauma reenactment?
So, some of you will have heard about, there's a therapeutic concept called transference and countertransference. So transference is when I'm with you in a room, Gareth, if I'm having a really bad day, it's a bit catching, right? Yeah. And our children are having a really bad day on a long-term, complicated level. And what they will do is they've survived incredible trauma. But the way they've done that is by adapting to the people who are giving them care. And so what they do when we look after them is they continue to operate in the way that they did when they were in those abusive situations. What that means for us is that we've got kids who are constantly miscuing, constantly giving us the wrong vibe, constantly getting confused about what we've said, and we are managing that stuff all the time. We've all also got our own stuff. You know, I might be having a bad day because one of my kids is sick or kept me up last night, all of that stuff. And what happens in that is that transference all gets really complicated. And what we see in a big organisation like this is that then, you know, goes up the chain. So we reenact family, you know, bad family dynamics as the, you know, teams in the homes do and the teams in the schools do as the children are giving to us. And that is the job. For me, how we manage that is the magic that heals these children. Not some clever therapy I do in a room, but how we constantly keep our staff giving the right messages, helping those children to learn adaptive ways, learn good coping strategies. So, you know, that for me, that is the job.
Yeah. No, thank you. A really great way of explaining it as well. Thank you. So you spoke a little bit about what the Hub do and offer.
Yeah.
So what is, just briefly, what is the sort of model of care that the Hub do? What is that?
For me, what unites Fairways at its most basic level is that all the children and young people and families we support have experienced adverse childhood experiences. Right, that is true for everyone. And there's been lots of conversations about whether GLADE really fit into that. But I would argue if you've got an EHCP and a neurodivergence, you've experienced some stuff to get into that school. All of those adverse childhood experiences have had a significant impact on their ability to get what they want out of life. What they need to support them is trauma-informed care. Like I said, they've adapted to incredibly difficult circumstances and shown incredible survival mechanisms, but these become maladaptive in normal situations. So a kid who is used to shouting and screaming to get what they want at home because they've been neglected, in school, that's a challenging behaviour. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what we've got to do is work with the right thing at the right time to help them on that journey back to functioning in society. Getting this right is really complicated and also really simple. If we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's a good thing to pin it on. And we're doing a massive piece of work on this in the model of care, and it's really exciting. But we have to understand where kids are currently. Do they have basic safety? Can they build relationships? And then once we understand that, how can we support them to climb the next rung of the ladder? For example, traditional therapy is an incredible tool, but to access it, you need to be fed and warm. You need to know that you'll have somewhere to sleep for the next few weeks. You need to feel safe in your body, so you need a regulated nervous system and to be able to keep yourself safe. You need to have some basic communication skills. You need to be able to trust someone. You need to be able to articulate how you feel, at least at a basic level. If I were to offer therapy to someone who didn't know where they were going to sleep tonight, would that be the right thing?
Yeah.
If I then closed their case because they couldn't engage, I actually think that's a form of institutional abuse. And what we do with our young people, if we give them the wrong thing, because we think life story work's going to work, but they don't know how to communicate and they feel completely unregulated in their body, is that then they feel like they failed at another thing. And for me, really good trauma-informed care is the right thing at the right time.
Okay. Good. Right. That's just okay. On that then.
Yeah.
When we talk about trauma-informed, because that word or that phrase or that expression could get, excuse me, branded around quite a lot, and it's like, oh, we're trauma-informed. It's like this new buzzword.
Yeah.
What's trauma-informed mean to you?
It means the right thing at the right time for the kids, but also for all of the people around them. So if we really want our staff to be able to work with our children in that way, then we've got to work with them in that way. And a really, truly trauma-informed organisation is such a difficult thing to achieve. I mean, you're right, loads of people have that shiny badge on their website, but actually to manage to create a non-for-profit, a charity that is, financially viable, that is, producing quality, that is looking after its people, while also thinking about our transference, our counter-transference, how the messages we give will be received, all of that stuff is really complicated. And it's a challenge I'm really up for, but it is a challenge. And I'm not here to pay it lip service. If we're not doing it properly, I'm out.
Yeah. No, we all want to do it properly.
Yeah, I know you do. And that's why I'm here, because actually, even from the outside, I saw better children's homes where people were motivated by the right the right core values, where people really wanted to learn, where we had this incredible RISE program so that people at least knew what trauma was. Like, you go to most children's homes, and schools, they've never heard the words. They don't know about adverse childhood experiences. We are so far ahead of some other places, and I'm so proud to be helping us take the next few steps.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so back to you, Lorna.
Yeah.
What's your why? What gets you out of bed in the morning? What drives you?
Okay, so there but for the grace of God am I.
Yeah.
Nursing is about incredible compassion and resilience in the face of other people's tragedy. And I absolutely see that when I look around here. I've experienced some of that in my own life. People who step in to care for strangers at the worst point of their life. And I really think that for me, that's why I get up in the morning, because I'm absolutely motivated to do that. But at Fairways, I work alongside a load of other people who do that too. And the NHS is full of humans who, when your mum, somebody else's mum, gets hurt or is dying, they treat them with incredible dignity and respect and care. And that's my why, because actually that is a real privilege to be in those moments.
Yeah, I love that. That's really nice. I think it's really interesting when you hear that, like, that really comes from a nurse, and why you get into nursing.
Yeah.
And to hear that, I've been speaking to a lot of people in social care, and from children's homes and stuff like that. But just listening to that, that's really nice to hear. Yeah, nice sentiment. Okay, so let's move on to your values then. I don't know why I keep saying this, but I do. But you used to get a stick of rock at the seaside. I don't know if you can still get them, and you break them in half, and you still have the
things inside.
Yeah.
I don't know why you're talking about breaking people in half.
No, I'm not. No. But what's the core values that run through you?
Yeah. So I think grace. I think the concept of grace, that any of us could be where the other person is, and that what we need to do is meet them where they're at with as much kindness as we can muster. And that's a really hard concept. I've worked with sex offenders. I've worked with parents who, did pretty awful things to their children. But there's always a reason. There's always a journey. And people make bad choices, but most of us are a product of our circumstances. And so having grace for those people is a real core value of mine. Gumption. I don't know if you've heard that word before. It's basically like grit, but sort of a very English version of it. It's being cheerful in the face of rubbish stuff, and being able to laugh, but not at things or at people, but being able to get through with good humour and determination, and I think I've got that in spades. And then hope. I think having hope for people, holding hope for people who've lost it for themselves. I've worked a lot with people who are suicidal, and actually what you have to do is just convince them to do tomorrow and promise them that you believe that one day things will get better. Holding hope is a really important thing for me, and I think that's what I've done with my life. I've held hope for other people,
absolutely.
And I hold hope for all of our young people and all of our families, and I think that's what we do here.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. So the last thing I finish on is talking about, I guess, your own well-being and that. But you touched on it earlier about, I guess, the impact that being a mental health nurse has had on your mental health over the years, and because you deal with such complex, it must be like, how do you manage that? Because you deal with some real complex, horrible situations, and see some horrible things. So that must really take its toll.
And it has, and I've tried all the dysfunctional coping strategies. I love food, I love drink, I love partying till dawn, but I have never found the answer at the bottom of a whiskey bottle, unfortunately. Chasing dopamine has led me in some tricky places, right? And I'm trying really hard to be more conscious of following that without losing my adventure. For me, as for anyone with some stuff in their past, it's been about 1% wins, not a magic wand. I've found some answers at church. I've certainly found hope there that there's something bigger than whatever awful thing I'm currently experiencing. Therapy's been really important for me. I put it off for years because my stuff seems so much less significant than my patients, but actually I've made use of NHS counselling. I've used employee assistance schemes. I also invested, I was privileged enough to have the money to invest in 2 years of psychotherapy, and it has changed the game for me. I practice what I preach, guys. I also really agree that the body keeps the score on trauma. And actually, we hold it in our body. So we're very good at talking about it. We're very good, but actually we need to get back into ourselves. And I do that by cold water swimming, preferably with a surfboard, or walking, or yoga, or anything that gets me out of my head and into my body. Slow washing up, cuddling my kids and crying at a Disney movie. I'm a mental health nurse, right? So I should be really good at mindfulness. I'm absolutely rubbish. I can't sit still. You'll probably hear that on the podcast, me fidgeting about the place. But trying to get out of my head and just slow down and do things a bit more gently for a while. That's how I process that stuff. And also not being frightened of that, not being frightened of our emotions around stuff. Some of the stuff we deal with, some of the kids we see, it's devastating. And we've got to be in that. But it's a privilege to be in that with them. And I really believe that in the rupture repair, in the hard times, when a kid is, on the floor sobbing because contact's been cancelled again, or when they're throwing stuff at you, that's the opportunity for healing.
Yeah.
And my life, it's been an absolute privilege to sit with people when they're in crisis. I've never been one for small talk, Gareth. Like, you get real human connection. That's the beauty of our job. And I think just being in it, just going through whatever you're in, trying to find the humour in it, trying to connect with other people. I mean, who wouldn't want that as their job?
Well, thank you for sharing that, Lorna. Well, I could speak to you all day, but we have run out of time.
Yeah.
So, just a huge thank you.
Yeah,
I really appreciate that.
My absolute privilege. Thank you for the opportunity.
It's been nice to learn a bit more about where you come from. Your mum's a Pompey girl.
Yeah.
You're a Scummer. No,
yeah. I'm from Southampton. Just get one in there.
And about your journey as being a mental health nurse and in Fairways. So thank you for your time today.
It's all right. Thank you.
And thank you for listening.